Welcome to the Modern Arizona podcast. Today's episode is extra special because it's part of our live events from the Modern Divorce Support Group on Facebook. If you want to stay in the loop and catch these sessions live, join us over at the Modern Divorce Support Group in Facebook. We'd love to see you there. All right, let's get back to the podcast. Wonderful. Welcome so much to the show. Today's Q&A is with Blending Beautifully's expert and founder, Brittney Phillips. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's Blending Bravely, but yes, thank you so much for having me.
What did I say?
Blending Beautifully. That's good too. But
it would be. But bravely is the better adjective here, honestly. Because this is not for the faint of heart. So how did you get into what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, over a decade ago, I went through my own divorce, really, really toxic situation. I'm not going to go into all the details about that, but found myself as a single mom with full custody and got back into the dating world. And, it was just kind of a train wreck when you're back in the dating world as a single parent. I met my now husband. He was also a single dad and divorced who does co-parenting with his co-parent. And we thought this is going to be so perfect. We both had one kiddo, got together and everybody got along so beautifully. And so we waited till we got married, till I moved into his house, and it was immediate. As soon as I moved in, disaster after disaster. And I was like, well, this wasn't supposed to happen to us. We are good people. We have good intentions. I was a school teacher, so I knew how to get along with kids. And anyway, it was so many hard things I did not anticipate. Nobody could have prepared me for all of the complicated dynamics. And I tell people this all the time, that blending our families together was harder for me than going through a divorce.
Really?
Yes. So we struggled for a couple years. We finally figured it out. We've been married over 10 years now. And our family has turned out to be the most beautiful and incredible thing, but it did not come easily. And so looking back, I'm like, I wish I had had more resources. I wish I had had more support, someone to kind of guide me through this process and tell me that this is normal and this is okay and there's nothing wrong with us, to help me with that. So that's why I do what I do now. I love to help women specifically as they are blending families together. Even if you're just divorced and not in a new family, I also consider that blending families. Even if you're just trying to co-parent with someone, you're in that blending dynamic where your co-parent is bringing a new step parent into the scene. You're also blending. So
right. Okay, so what are some things that surprised you? Because I would think, especially as somebody who was a school teacher, you would have that down, right?
Right. I know. That's what I thought too. Something that caught me off guard was, well, there's several things, but one was that our kids struggled, both being only children and then all of a sudden having someone in their space, and they just were butting heads all the time. And we thought they'd figure it out pretty quick. They were both pretty young. And that was hard. Another dynamic was, I didn't know if there was a term for this until a few years ago, but it's called a loyalty bind, where you're nodding your head like you're familiar with the term.
Yeah.
Where my stepchild wasn't sure they wanted me in their life because they felt like they're being disloyal to their biological parent. And I took that really personal. I was like, but I'm trying to be nice. I'm doing everything I can. What's the problem? And so that connection, that love, that bonding didn't come as quickly as I had hoped or expected it would.
Right.
Now, today, we have a great relationship, but it's taken many years to get to the point that we're at. So that part was hard. And then one other dynamic that I think of that was really big was the idea that we had both been divorced, came from pretty unhealthy cycles and things. And we brought that with us, whether we wanted to or not. I'd gone to a therapist and done a lot of healing work on my own before getting back into this marriage, but there are certain aspects that don't surface until you're back in that place.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of triggers, a lot of insecurities. You quickly fall back into like communication cycles, like defensiveness, walls go up. And that happened for both of us. And so learning how to cope with those and how to connect at the same time, because immediately, if you feel like, especially when you're a parent, if you feel like someone's criticizing your child or it's not going as easily as you'd like, walls go up.
Oh, yeah.
Instant.
Yeah.
So,
oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about here. Let's first start with the first thing you brought up. What do you do when the kids don't get along?
yeah. So the thing I love to tell my clients is there's not a lot you can do. You can't force a relationship. And you can focus on what we like to do as humans is point the finger at somebody else. It's their fault. This is the reason why. We like to justify why, may come up with a reason why this is happening. And the best thing you can do is focus on what can I control? Where is my control? I can't force someone to treat my child this certain way, but I can set rules in my house, set boundaries about how we treat each other. We can set the tone in our home. And that's basically all I can do. I can create experiences where we're able to have more fun together, build connection, start to build unity, but that takes time and that's going to take some patience. So that's where I'm going to put my focus, is creating those experiences and setting the rules and boundaries in my home to create like the safe space for everyone to thrive. If people aren't feeling safe, you're not going to get very far. So,
Okay. So, can you give me some specific examples
of how to do that?
Sure. Or let's say that people have a blended family dynamic and there are kids who just don't get along. They're fighting a lot. They're in each other's space. Maybe there's not enough space for everybody to have their own room. They're fighting a lot. Maybe one's passive and one's less passive. What do you do?
Yeah. So what we had to do in our family, had to be very intentional. Like, we want kindness in our house. That was, we had to like speak it out loud. Like, what do we want? What do we not have? Yes. We want kindness. So how do we create that? Our kids were at an age, we kind of turned it into a game, made it a little bit more playful. We had a jar. We called it the kindness jar. It was so creative. But every time we caught someone being kind, we would add a little bean to the jar. And you couldn't catch yourself being kind. It had to be somebody else in the family. It could be parents or it could be anybody. But the goal of this jar was to fill it up to the top. And once we did that, the whole family got a reward. We decided what that reward was. It was usually an experience that we got to go do together, something that was fun and something that we didn't typically do, like going to a trampoline park or I think even once we were like, we'll go to Disneyland. Like, we need kindness.
Oh, I do. Yes. There was a time when my two biological children would not get along. They were at each other's throats. And I told them if they could be kind and work on their relationship for 3 months, I would get them both new iPhones.
There you go.
And that's what it took. It's what it took. But it made an actual difference in their relationship.
Right.
So, faking it for those 3 months made it happen. So I was feeling at first very stupid for offering this type of reward, right? To these children who were, I think they were maybe like 13 and 15 at the time, something like that. But it worked. So
sometimes it's just that motivation to swing it the other way, right?
And habits and even if you have to fake being kind, you will get better at it. You will then experience a better relationship. So this is really good because we can create conditions in our home that promote the behavior we want, whether they're bio kids or blended kids. So that's really good. Okay, now what do you do when you're not connecting with your stepchild? You maybe have a conflict, like there's a personality conflict, like you just don't get this person, and then you've got massive conflict between spouses because Everybody knows, right?
Right.
When the step parent isn't connecting with your biological child and they seem to be picking on them. What do you do?
Yeah. Okay. This is a good question. I have definitely experienced it. So I'll tell you what I did. um, you can have hurt feelings and feel sorry for yourself and like play the victim, and that's going to make it worse. So just so you know, that's one option.
You mean
You
the
can
parent.
do that.
As the parent, you can be like, woe is me, you're the
Yeah.
worst.
Yeah. Or even as the step parent, right? Like,
Oh, okay.
you don't like me or they don't like me and I tried really hard and blah, blah, blah. Like, okay.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
So you can do that. That's an option. Or you can say, like, get curious, like, why am I triggered by these behaviors? What is it that this is bringing up for me? I have clients that I've worked with that they're like, my stepchild reminds me of my ex-partner and I cannot stand this. And that is beautiful. I love to say that triggers are a sign that there's something to heal. And so if that's coming up, if there's something coming up that's really hard for you to handle emotionally, that's a beautiful, your body telling you that this is something that you get to heal and face head on now. It's time to look into you and say, what is actually going on here? Because in relationships, it's often actually not about what's actually happening in the moment. We're like making it mean something, or we have an interpretation of behavior that's skewing our perception. So
Definitely. I think that happens a lot with step parents where one, the child and the parent have their dynamic. And maybe the step parent perceives that dynamic to be the child being bratty or disrespectful to the parent.
Yes.
And the parent, like, this is their dynamic. They're cool with it. They're working, they don't interpret the events the same way. But the step parent is just watching it and they're getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And then they're, like, I think that comes up a lot for people.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm thinking too, before I was a parent, I had this idea of how the perfect parent should be. I was a really good parent before I was a parent.
Absolutely. Weren't we all?
And my daughter was younger than my stepson, and I saw certain behaviors and I was like, I cannot believe our kids are like complete opposites, right? Like energy wise.
Yeah.
I was like, why is he doing that? That's so terrible, blah, blah, blah. Like I had all sorts of judgments, which I hate to admit now.
It's healthy, right? We should talk about it.
It's the reality though. We do it. I wish, fast forward, we had 2 more kids together. I don't know if I mentioned that. So we have 4 kids now.
No, you didn't. Okay.
And my 2 youngest are so much like my stepson was. I'm like, oh, I was so judgy when he did this behavior. And I'm like, it actually didn't really have very much to do with the parenting. It had a lot to do with personality. And I made that mean something. Yeah.
Sure. So it's very easy to look at a personality and then label that as a bad behavior.
Yes. Yes. Because, my daughter never does that. So this other way must be wrong. Right.
Yeah. Like if you have an easy kid or a kid that you really, really connect with who behaves a certain way.
Yes. Yes. My daughter is very much a rule follower. And so in my head, I was like, this is the right way. We'll take her to story time. She'll sit on my lap the whole time. And like, I was a good parent because my daughter did that.
Yeah.
I made it mean that. My younger 2 do not do that now. Yeah. They don't. And I love them for it, actually. I think it's so great. I wish I had that perspective for my stepson.
Right.
Hindsight.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So then back to the question, you're finding yourself really triggered by a child's behavior. I know this has happened to every single one of us. So you're finding yourself really triggered by somebody's behavior. What do you do? Do you talk to your partner or your spouse about it? Do you just go to counseling? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it would depend a lot on, do I talk to my partner? It depends on how reactive I am. If it's going to trigger my partner, if I bring this up, sometimes our partner is not the right person to talk to about their child, about certain behaviors yet. Okay, so, and I tell this to my clients a lot, that I'm like, this is why you come to me, because I get it, I'm not judging, but your partner, like, you're talking about something they really, really love, and they might not be ready to hear whatever your raw feelings about this person. So sometimes our partner's not the right person to talk about through some of those really difficult and hard feelings about their child. So yes, if you're really struggling, being triggered, I would recommend like find a coach, find a therapist, find somebody that you can kind of vent to, try to get curious about where these feelings are coming from, and how can we move forward? What can I do? Instead of what often happens is we only start to see the negative. I only see this thing that's triggering me, and any other good thing, I literally can't even see it because the one behavior is so loud. So finding someone, I pay my own coaches to help me see outside of the vision that I have, because we have a hard time when we're trying to tell ourselves a story, to paint this picture, the story that we're telling ourselves about the situation. It's hard to see outside of that. So having an outside person that can say, well, what have you thought about it this way? Or what about this? Or what are some good traits about this child? Because it is a child, and, you know, even though they might have something in common with your ex who you feel really strongly about, it doesn't mean that they're going to turn out like him or her. That's not written in stone.
Right. And your relationship with I have a son who's just like my ex, but like the relationship's different. We're not married. My job's different. We don't, it's fine. It's fine that he's exactly like his dad, who I couldn't stay married to, because we're not married, you know? He's a kid and a young adult now, but yeah, so I think, yeah, you don't want to fight with your children as if you're fighting with your ex. But somehow, you know, when their words come out of their mouth, that's the exact same words that you've heard, right? That can be really like jarring.
Oh, yeah. And so if you feel like you are being triggered, what I tell people all the time is like, you need to go like remove yourself, put yourself in a timeout, so you can actually respond in a way that you want to, instead of reacting to the trigger, to the situation. So controlling what I can is me. And that's often, if I'm really triggered by it, I'm removing myself physically, so I can calm my nervous system down and really think about how I want to respond. If I respond this way, is it going to get me the results that I want? Is it going to help the connection with my child or with my stepchild? Or is it going to build a wider gap?
Yeah. So there are a lot of step-parents who feel like they're almost prisoners in their own home. Like they can't do anything right, not by their stepchild and not by their spouse or partner, because, you know, it's not their job, or they did it wrong, or whatever. So if somebody's feeling like that, like I have to hide in my bedroom or whatever, like what do you tell them?
Yeah. So I tell them, one, like, I get it. Like it's a real huge adjustment to become a step parent. It's such an interesting dynamic, and it looks different for every single person. There's not like, here's how to be a step parent, because some step parents are like 100% being the parent. And some step parents like see their stepkids twice a month and everything in between, right? Or even twice a year. So there's not a set rule for this is how to be a step parent. This is how you show up. It is very isolating. And when I have step parents come to me like feeling isolated, feeling like they don't have any kind of say, a lot of times they want to say it's because of my stepchild, because of them, like we're pointing the blame there. But I'm like, wait, like hold up. This is actually a partner issue. This is a problem between you and your partner. You need to be on the same page. That's got to be number one. And if that happens, and when that happens, you will start to feel like a member of the family.
Okay. So you're having massive conflict with your stepchild. You already said, like, if you're super triggered, don't go to your partner. But really, it's an issue that you have to resolve with your partner. How do we do that?
Yes. So if I'm triggered, I'm not going to my partner, but when I can be in the right mindset, right heart space is what I like to call it, we can have hard conversations, and we should be having hard conversations with our partner, but we can't be a place where we're going to instantly send our partner into defensiveness. So there's like this art to having the conversations. The timing has to be right for both partners. And we have got to, I call it getting on the same side of the rock, where if I have like this massive boulder and we're both pushing against it, the boulder's not moving anywhere. Like we're pushing towards each other.
Right.
Where versus I'm like, let's get on the same side of this boulder and we're going to push together in the same direction. We have the same goals. We have the same vision. And that's when it will move. That's when we can kind of get some momentum. That's when the whole family transforms, is when you can be working together as a partnership. So your partner is respecting you, but also setting boundaries with their kids. They're hearing your input. They're like, oh, we want to try it this way. Okay, like, great. I hear what you're saying. Thank you for that idea. Let's think outside the box. Let's try new things, right? Otherwise, if you're like, just shut your mouth, you're not the parent, that's not helpful. And nobody wants to step into that role. Nobody wants to just say, this is how we do it. These are our family rules. You can't parent my child. Like, that's not helpful.
Right. Yeah. So before my partner and I moved in together, I've got 4 kids. He's got 3 kids, but they're not all together all the time. And I really like what you said about like every single step-parent relationship is different, because if you're a step-parent 100% of the time, your role is different.
Right.
If you're a step-parent 50% of the time, but they have a very, very active parent involved, your role is different. If you are a step-parent who has a long-distance relationship with kids, it's all different. But my counselor recommended that we figure out like, what do we want for our family, and what are those, like what you said earlier, in our family, like we value kindness, or how do we create kindness? Like figuring out basic rules together and being explicit about it. Like we value each other's space, or whatever it is, can really help, I think, in those moments when things are burning down and they feel awful, and we can go back to, okay, what did we agree on? Like, what did we agree on was important to our family? And how does the situation that I'm dealing with impact what we're now experiencing?
Yes. I love that you're saying that. I like to think of it as like a birth of a new family, where sometimes, imagine, like some of us like to think we're right about everything. Like I was a great mom, like I mentioned earlier, and I thought all my ways were the right way.
Yeah.
And every way my husband did it was wrong.
Sure.
That was not helpful in trying to blend our family together. Like we had to create something new. It couldn't be like, why don't you just do everything I've done because it's really good. It's worked really well.
Ooh.
That's not beneficial for my marriage. That might benefit me. It might be easier for me as an individual, but my marriage is really going to suffer if I'm like, come over here on my side all the time. There's no compromise.
That's really interesting, because most of the time what you hear is, each parent needs to kind of take point on their biological children and be the boss of the biological children. But what you are suggesting is that there needs to be what is our family dynamic? What are we going to decide to try together?
Yes. And actually, I agree too with what you said earlier. Of part of it will depend on the ages of your kids. I do think the biological parent should do most of the parenting for their own children, especially because of loyalty buying things. And at the beginning, some kids are going to be way more open to having another parent step in. So, for example, my daughter, my husband is dad to my oldest now. That's all she knows is dad. And so that his role as he actually has adopted her since. So he is dad.
He's dad.
Legally and everything. Dad. But when he was stepdad.
Yeah. And probably even before he adopted her, he was the same role. So even if you haven't adopted your children, if you're full time in that role,
you're the parent. Yeah. Yes. It was very different dynamic versus me with my stepson. And he has a mom. half the time. Like he's with her he has a mom all the time, but he's with her half the time, right?
Right.
And even to this day, like our relationship is a very unique dynamic. It looks different than any of my other kids because I'm kind of this just like an extra person who cares about him. I don't even know if I'm like an aunt. Some people like to say like be like the fun aunt, but I don't even know if I'm that. But it's just been this role that's changed, ebbed and flowed, and it's looked different at different times. Right now, I actually told my husband this last week, I think he respects my opinion over his parents at this point in his life, which I kind of love. I'm like, this is great because I'm not his parents. I'm somebody else.
Which is beautiful, right? Because we're programmed to hate our parents, as children. How old is he now?
He's 16 now.
Yes. Okay. So at 16, we're biologically supposed to be discounting what our parents say.
Yes.
They're dumb and we're going to go off and be, our own human. But if you can manage to stay in this role where they don't view you like a parent, but as an adult who they love and trust, how did you do that? Please. Everybody wants that.
No, I don't even know. It really came to me, changing my expectations. I had certain expectations when we got married of what our relationship was going to look like. And I had to kind of step back and say, what does he want in this relationship? He doesn't want me to be his mom. He doesn't want me to pretend to be a mom for him. So I had to let his dad take the lead in most parenting things. And I still do. If like he's got to get chores done, I don't tell him. I let dad do that still. And when he wants my opinion, I let him come to me and I will like gladly share how I feel. Like I'll share the truth. Every once in a while I'll pipe in and be like, yeah, I agree with dad, right? Whatever. But it took a lot of keeping my mouth quiet and allowing the relationship to be what he wanted it to be. I found that there were certain topics that he felt extra connected with me on. And so I kind of leaned into that, where other topics he didn't want me anywhere near certain topics. And so looking at like, what is the unique aspect that I can bring to this relationship that maybe his other parents don't have to offer. So for example, he is pretty musical, and I was very, very musical growing up. Neither of his parents were super musical, and so he'll come to me and like he really wants my validation when it comes to musical things. He's like, "Hey, I got this," or "Are you coming to my concert?" and that type of thing. And I really love that he values our relationship in that aspect.
So he's close in age to your daughter, right?
They're 3 years apart.
3 years. Okay. And then you have these two other younger kids. Are you in a dynamic where you're doing most of the parenting with your own biological children?
Oh yeah. The other three here all the time. I'm mom 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you handle the fact that there's rules that you have, expectations that you have for your three that you are consistently setting and holding, but you don't for him?
Yes, that is still something that's difficult for me every once in a while. Things like that I feel really strongly about.
Yeah.
We're talking about like screen times or like cell phone use, like those type of things.
Right.
I had to learn to let go. And that has been really hard. I cannot control what happens at the other parent's house. And this has not just been hard for me, but for my husband too. I'll say that. The just understanding that I can only control what happens in my home, and I can teach what I believe and how I feel, and I can teach the why behind it. But once he goes back to the other home, I don't have control. I don't. And so I hope that actually what's ended up being really beautiful about it is it's helped me become more open-minded. And help me learn that kids can still turn out pretty good, even if they're parented the exact way I would parent them. They can be decent human beings, and I think they get to choose. They see like maybe two drastically different lifestyles, and they get to choose which lifestyle, which pieces they like. One thing that has been really fun for me to learn is like that our co-parent, his mom, even though she's wildly different from us and parents pretty different from us, like he has learned some beautiful and amazing life skills from her that I wouldn't have been able to teach him myself. Like he is so social with any type of person. And I don't think he would probably get that. And he's actually helped my younger girls to be more outgoing and be able to have conversations with whoever they want to, right? And so there's that interesting dynamic. It did take like a little bit of humility to even see that perspective.
Sure.
It took me a while to get there.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of parents miss out on that.
What about in your house? Like in your house with your children, you've got something going on, you're setting a rule, and you're being the primary parent who's setting rules and holding boundaries, but you're kind of not doing that with your oldest.
Yes. So that has been a thing in our home. Like, well, why does he get to do this and we can't, right? Like, and I just decided like we have to speak the truth to our kids because it can't be equal all the time. It's not going to be equal just because he had it. And so we have blunt conversations. He has a different mom and he has some different rules. He goes to another house. There's also been an aspect where he literally travels the world with his mom, which is great.
Wow.
It's great for him.
Sure. And sad for your kids.
Yeah. They're like, well, why can't we travel? Like he's on a trip every other month. And I'm like, yeah, like that's great for him. And there might be hard feelings that come up from that. And that's okay. Let's talk about it and let's have these conversations. Let's speak. I want to speak truth to my kids. I don't want to minimize their feelings and their emotions. So we're going to have hard conversations so they can understand. I mean, they may not understand till they're a little bit older, but at least they won't feel like I gypped on my hope.
Right. Okay. And so he's 16 and he's still going back and forth 50-50. Mm-hmm. Does that still work? Like, do you see a point in time where that will no longer work?
Yeah. So we actually were kind of anticipating as he got older and became a teenager that he might want to spend more time with his friends down at his mom's house. He goes to school. School at her house. So a lot of his friends from school are down that direction. And we're like, well, he might want to be with them more often. But we've actually found for us that we were ready to accept that as a fact, but he's actually really enjoyed being up here with us. And he has met some friends up here and that's really worked in our favor, that he wants to come spend time here. He actually got his driver's license a couple months ago. And that has been lifesaver, like amazing that he can just drive himself. He doesn't have to wait for his mom to drive him up or his dad to go down and get him.
Sure.
And so that's been a lot of freedom and kind of fun for him too, like this sense of freedom that he can choose even more often where he wants to be.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Let me read through some questions that we have here and make sure that I've gotten to everybody's question. I know we're a little bit over time. Do you have just a few more minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me see. How do you deal with the guilt of feeling like you're not doing enough for everyone in the blended family?
That's a good question. So, what I like to help my clients understand is that blending families, there is a grief that comes with it. Every member of the family is dealing with some aspect of grief because blended families are formed from like a death or a divorce or a separation of some sort. And so it affects the parents, it affects the kids, it affects the step-parent, anyone in the dynamic, it's affecting them. How do I cope with feeling like it's not ever going to be enough? I just have to accept that this is what it is. I didn't break it, right, on my own. Like I made the best decision. So I'm going to take my situation, for example. I got divorced and I felt really broken. I was a single mom and I was like, this is terrible. But looking back, like if I had stayed in that marriage, that's even way more broken and would have affected my daughter in a lot bigger ways.
Mhm.
So blending and like finding my joy and finding myself and healing and working on myself and giving her that safety in that family was actually one of the most beautiful things that I could have given her. For her to be able to see a relationship, a healthy relationship where we're learning to communicate and apologize and forgive and love and be vulnerable, like that is a beautiful gift to give your kids. So maybe I couldn't make up for the trauma, but I can't go back and change the past. I can't go choose a new first husband.
Right.
But I can choose what I'm doing today. And what I do today actually matters even more by setting the example, like, hey, I am setting boundaries now, like how people are going to treat me and how I show up and how I'm not going to choose to be as reactive. I want to be intentional about my everything, every aspect of my life. And I think her kids are going to have trauma no matter what. No matter what we do.
That's 100%. I tell my kids that. Like, I tell them, like, I'm going to do the very, very, very best I can. And you're going to do the very, 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 very best you can when you have children. And it's still not going to be good enough. Like, there's still going to be times when we've missed the mark. And
totally.
It's the way it is.
It's being human. It's being human.
It's being human.
Yeah.
Okay. One last question that's really, really timely before I let you go. We've been talking about gift giving, and the question here is, do you have tips for making the holidays and special occasions inclusive and enjoyable with everyone in the blended family, even if you don't have the kids necessarily on the same days?
Yeah. So I love to just be able to ask my kids to like really hear their opinions. I feel like that alone is very, very valuable. That like, hey, I care about your opinion. I care about what you want. As far as like Christmas is on my mind. Okay. So this is what's coming to my mind right now.
We'll be here in a minute.
It's like really soon.
Yeah.
And I know that this is hard in blended families because it feels unfair and we make that mean something sometimes. So my stepson gets 2 big Christmases at 2 different houses, but am I going to give him less because he has another Christmases at his house? No, I'm not. We're going to treat our kids like equally. So there's that aspect, like we're going to do our best. But asking them, like our kids are not getting the same types of presents and we're actually not even spending the same amount on our kids this year.
This is part of our debate. So talk to me about this. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So for example, our 16-year-old is he wants to go on a humanitarian trip. And I'm like, yes, do that. They like, that's such a great choice for you. Like, I want you to do that. And so he's asking for some money to go towards that. On the other hand, I have a 5-year-old and like she asked for like a butterfly for Christmas. I think that's what she asked for. So I'm like, okay, like I'm not going to give her the same amount. The quantity doesn't matter as much, but I want every child to feel loved and appreciated and like they had a good Christmas. So my youngest she's getting more gifts. They're going to cost way less.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it matters that much. Everyone's going to feel happy at the end of Christmas. They're all going to feel like they got what they were hoping for and that they were loved. We have tried to avoid that by Santa only brings 1 gift to our family, and it's usually a family gift.
Interesting. So, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I don't think that it's necessary to spend the same amount of money on every child to make it fair or to make it special for them. And I don't think that you have to have necessarily the same number of gifts.
Right.
Like if you're truly getting something that is meaningful to them, that that they feel joy in receiving, hopefully we've checked the box better than making sure everybody has the exact same number of gifts to open.
Right. And some kids are more competitive and they will be counting.
Yes.
They will be counting the gifts.
Yes.
And that's something to consider too. So
Yeah.
my stepson was that child. He would have done that. And so we were a lot more fair about number of gifts
Okay.
when they were younger, but they were also closer in age, those two, right? So we did try to keep it more equal just so it wasn't a thing. But now that like teenagers and preschoolers have very different needs.
Right.
And
Right.
I
Okay.
don't
So
know.
if you have competitive kids, you probably need to pay closer attention, because my kids are also like big gaps.
Yeah.
So it feels like it's less important then. Like they just have very different necessarily things that are important to them. But if your kids are close in age or competitive, then we have to be a little more careful.
Yeah, I would, just to make sure that they understand that they are valued in this family and loved and cared for. So sometimes we get like a gift and we're like, well, this child would like it. Like, for example, we bought some heated blankets because our girls really like cozy, comfy things. So we're like, oh, let's get one for this daughter. And we're like, oh, actually the other two are going to want one too. So we're like, we'll just get one for everybody this year. Like, we don't want it to be a thing. We're going to get different colors so they don't fight about it. But you just have to make a call.
Yeah.
But I would absolutely, like, if you know that child is competitive and they will take it personal, I would be aware and try to make it seem as fair as you can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for letting me take all of your time. We went 15 minutes over, but it was really
totally
good
fine.
and people got their questions answered. And I really appreciate you being here. And we will make this a podcast so that people have access to it in the future. But Brittney at Blending Bravely, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's been so fun.
It has. Have a great day and have a wonderful Christmas.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Arizona podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, make sure to download it, like it, leave a review, and share it with your friends. If you know someone who would be a good guest or you would like to be on the Modern Arizona podcast, make sure to give us an email or reach out to us at mymodernlaw.com.